The Switch is kind of the perfect platform to resurrect the greatest hits of the last generation, as while the main selling point on other platforms is that they're more HD, the gist with the Switch is that every game is portable. Dark Souls is without a doubt my favourite PlayStation 3 game, and it's not even close. Well, apart from Demon's Souls. So to have Dark Souls finally playable on not only a Nintendo platform, but one that you can take anywhere, is practically a dream come true. It should be said though, the term remaster is perhaps used kinda loosely here. The Switch version doesn't have many of the enhanced effects of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One release, and is instead more of a tidied up version of the vanilla Dark Souls. That said, a lot of people, myself included, weren't fond of the graphical changes made in the previous remaster. The lighting and effects, while technically upgraded, made the art look worse, especially with certain materials. So by all means and purposes, Dark Souls on the Switch is the same build from PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, only this time it's a lot smoother. The infamous Blighttown could be a slideshow on PlayStation 3, but here on Switch, you'll be hard pressed to notice a difference when going from area to area. Bandai Namco have crafted a really consistent version of Dark Souls 1, and having gone through a 100% playthrough on Switch, I still regard this as the best game in the trilogy. Compared to the original game, there are a few quality of life improvements, my favourite being able to consume multiple souls at once. That seriously saves a lot of time. But all in all, Dark Souls is mostly the same game it's always been. What makes Dark Souls so good is that it constantly grows. You grow, your weapons grow, your enemies grow, the world grows. People often focus on the aspect of challenge, but difficulty is merely a pillar of Dark Souls, and what the difficulty really translates to is experience. Much like an NES game, such as Mega Man, your first time through a level is sure to be full of death. But with each failure comes a learning experience. You get better, you learn, and it's rare to die in the same place. Dark Souls is certainly a hard game, but it's not a cheap one. Enemy AI are not dynamic. They'll always fall for the same tricks, and sometimes even fall literally. You can take advantage of them, draw them out one by one, and strafe around them for a backstab. Dark Souls excels at making you feel good at the game, when all it really comes down to is learning patterns and mastering what the AI can and can't do. I spent far too long fighting Knight Astorius, but once I got his pattern down, all I needed to do was dodge right when he telegraphs a vertical slash, dodge backwards when he telegraphs a horizontal one, and hit him during a very slow attack. There are signs and clear solutions to just about every enemy and boss in the game, and when introducing a new enemy, they'll always do it on a one-on-one encounter. The challenge is practically every enemy does have the potential to kill you, so even when dealing with the most basic encounter, you should always be on guard. And if you're still having trouble, you can use humanity to either kindle a bonfire to give you more health refills, or summon an AI or real-life player to help you out. There's a lot of challenges, but you're never really alone to face them in Dark Souls. So by all means, be ready to die and die again, but there's always the tools to grow and assist yourself, and nothing quite beats the feeling of finally taking down a towering boss that you spent the last hour attempting to master. Adding more tension to the death system, every time you die, you lose all your souls, which are essentially the currency of Dark Souls. If you get back to your place of death, you can simply claim them again. But failing to do so, they're gone forever, and that is always crushing. It can certainly be a punishing game, but those punishments push you to be better. The world of Dark Souls is quite unlike any other. It's technically all open to explore from the get-go. You can go straight from the world's central area, Firelink Shrine, to the catacombs, but the extremely deadly skeleton should probably be an indication that, well, you shouldn't. But the important part is you absolutely can. Not only does the path often split off into different areas, but there are huge parts of Dark Souls that you never need to step foot in. Entire areas with unique bosses and enemies all their own will likely never be seen by half the players. It really highlights how much care and passion was poured into Dark Souls, and one of my favourite things is the entire structure of the world always makes sense in the context of your travel. There's a staircase from the Darkroot Basin to the Undead Burg, and Analondo connects to the Duke's Archives. There are shortcuts and easy accessibility points just about everywhere, and the transition always makes sense. The journey from the Valley of the Drakes to the dark and gloomy Blighttown completely makes sense with the eerie build-up. And when you look up in the sky in Blighttown, you'll see a ray of daylight that just fails to make it down to you. Meanwhile, the tallest area, Analondo, is baked in a daylight gaze. The world of Lordran is a character all its own. It's rare for the game to actually tell you what's going on, and so most of the time you're just pushing forward, much like you would in a Metroid or Castlevania game. But secretly, every area and boss has a deep lore that's never directly told by the game. You can either read up on it, or interpret it yourself. A great wolf, Sif, guards a grave with a giant sword, but what does this mean in terms of story? The game won't directly tell you, but if you invest yourself outside of simple direct communication, then you're in for one of the deepest stories of any game. Even the few NPCs of the world don't do much to enlighten a linear style of storytelling. One of the first characters instructs you to ring one of the 2 bells, but that's just about all the directional guidance you're ever given. It's a game that trusts you to not only work out where to go on your own, but also work out what's happening on your own, and it can be absolutely fascinating to see different interpretations of the story from different people. Just be wary that not every NPC has friendly intentions. Some will speak the truth, but others will lie and kick you down a hole, and your interactions with them can have permanent changes on the world and its surroundings. You can even outright kill characters and they won't come back. Don't kill a blacksmith.
You've got some nerve coming at me like that. I'll tear you to shreds, you bloody hollow.
So, how does this all work on a portable? To put it simply, incredibly well. Dark Souls is infamous for not being able to pause, but with the sleep button being a mere inch away, it's never been easier to put Dark Souls down and pick it back up again, even while in the midst of a fight. Sure, other platforms have a form of sleep mode, but the PS4 in particular is far too slow to be used in quite the same way. Dark Souls is the kind of game that consumes your mind. While lying in bed, I'd often think about areas I hadn't explored yet, and because of how flexible the Switch is, those thoughts became actions. Even though the Switch has been with us for more than a year, it's still remarkable to have such a vast world in the palm of your hands, and this kind of flexibility elevates Dark Souls to new heights. It is a shame that some other aspects weren't quite tailored for the Switch though. The default rumble is frankly too strong, and while you can turn it down to a more pleasing amount, it makes me wish they went all the way to provide actual HD rumble support. This is just the same buzz all versions have. So you can remap every single button in the game apart from 2 very key ones. Dark Souls on the Switch defaults B to be accept and A to be cancel, and this cannot be changed for whatever reason. This took a long time to get used to, and early on even resulted in a few deaths where I'd try to pick up an item only to roll off an edge. The button layout is the exact same as other versions of Dark Souls, but A should always be confirm. It's an unwritten rule for games on Nintendo platforms, and while I did get used to it over time, I shouldn't have had to. And that's really the only blemish on what's otherwise a brilliant, but perhaps a little safe port. There's nothing really new here. You get the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, a better frame rate, and the ability to play the game on the go. But all in all, Dark Souls on the Switch is very much the same game from 2011. There is an exclusive amiibo for Solaire Restorer, but he's essentially just a quick map for the Praise the Sun emote. A cool extra, but it doesn't make this version stand out. So Dark Souls on the Switch is basically just Dark Souls on the Switch, and that's perfectly fine with me. The most miraculous part is even after 2 sequels and Bloodborne, the original Dark Souls doesn't feel at all dated. It would have been nice to roll in more free-flowing directions like in the sequels, but that would have likely thrown the bosses off balance, so I get why it wasn't in there. What's here works, and the core of Dark Souls, the combat, is still one of the most satisfying systems of any game. Whether you've worked up your magic build and shoot from afar, or focus on thrilling close quarters melee action, Dark Souls reminds you why it's the best in the biz. I absolutely love Dark Souls. Despite spending over 150 hours with the original, I gladly did everything again, and now I'm ready for New Game Plus. It's a sprawling RPG, but it doesn't pad itself out, and every single sector of this world justifies itself. Much like Chrono Trigger, Dark Souls doesn't sit around. My playthrough clocked in at 33 hours, and that's doing absolutely everything. But there's still more to come back to. It's an infinitely replayable game where you can take different routes and continue to grow your character from playthrough to playthrough, and likelihood is, every single time you'll find something new. I've always loved Dark Souls, and playing it on Switch makes it feel new again. If you love adventure games and want a world that you can really lose yourself in, then you really don't need to look any further. Prepare to die, and prepare to love every minute of it. For more on Dark Souls and other things gaming too, be sure to subscribe to GameXplain.